Yeah, I'm like, listen, we're really conditioned to using our cell phone first and going to our cell phone first for things. But should we? Like, is that what we should have to do as drivers, right? We have these new cars with these big, beautiful screens. Like, we should be using the in-dash to be able to do all that navigation because it's just going to be a better experience, and it's all in there for us.
Welcome back to Turn Down for What, your source for EV news and updates. Like and subscribe for more content like this episode. Let's dive on in.
Welcome back to Turn Down for What? Another day, another episode. Today, we have the unique privilege of spotlighting another really unique player in the industry. I know last week I had mentioned that we might discuss advanced air mobility, but we're saving up for a really good episode coming up, maybe next week, maybe the week after. All that being said, we had kind of for several weeks had we actually at the ACT Expo we're supposed to meet up with Parkopedia and ended up having some other scheduling conflicts and weren't able to connect. So since then, we've had some communications and really wanted to take some time and meet Kyle. Welcome to the podcast, Kyle, and kind of learn more about what you guys do, kind of how you're an interesting niche in the space of renewable energy and the specifically attached to parking and EV infrastructure. So Kyle, give us an introduction to yourself and kind of some of what you have history wise.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for having me on the show. Greatly appreciate it. Always love an opportunity to talk about EV. So, my name is Kyle Ammon. I've been with Parkopedia for about a year now, and I am the director of business development for EV. Um, and prior to Parkopedia, I worked for a US EV manufacturer. Parkopedia is the global leader in connected car services, connecting drivers with accurate, up-to-date parking and EV charging data. We really focus on improving the driver experience, both in the discovery and the transaction area, right? So we don't own any chargers, we don't do any of that. We're an aggregation layer that also does transactions.
You're the dating app that gets A to B, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. We add a lot of value in there, right? So it's not just aggregation. Aggregation is one piece of what we do. But really, what we've done to make a name for ourselves is going to be more on the data cleansing side, right? So we do have more parking data than anybody else in the world. We are the definitive leader there, which is a nice little feather in our cap. But what makes us special and what makes the OEMs regularly come to us for their data needs is the fact that we do all this cleansing, right? So we've spent more than 15 years perfecting our data cleansing methods, and that's really something that sets us apart from everybody else in the aggregation
Your
world.
guys have a database of what, 70 million parking spaces, or what's that number?
Oh, the number, I'm going to get it wrong. I think we got like 90 million parking spaces
That's
across 90 countries,
yeah.
20,000 cities. On the EV charging side, last time I looked, it was, probably a month and a half ago, and we're over 800,000. We're probably approaching 900,000 now, somewhere in
That's
that
when
region.
Jesse gets a twinkle in his eye and thinks that's a lot of data.
Yeah. It's a ton of data, right? And to
Yeah.
go through and cleanse all that data and maintain all that data, it takes an army, right? It takes an army of people, and it takes a lot of experience, and a lot of maturing.
So can you tell us more about the origins of Parkopedia and like how the company has evolved over the years since its founding?
Yeah, absolutely. So, CEO Eugene was out. He was at a conference actually in California. This is a story I heard. He was at a conference in California. Is looking for parking, right? And the way you look for parking for is you pull up to a parking garage, you see if there's any open spots. Maybe you go in, see if there's open spots or not. Then you go to the next one. So he'd hit a couple different parking garages, couldn't find any spots, got really frustrated. Looked online, couldn't find any database or anything to show him where to go or how to find parking garages. And he decided that that was what he was going to pursue, right? He was going to put together an online database to help people find parking garages. So it was all about enhancing the user experience and enhancing the driver experience, right? Um, so we started there. Fast forward a little bit, we become the largest aggregator in the world, operating in more than 90 countries, aggregating all this data. OEMs quickly realized that this is really important to have as they're developing their in-dash solutions and their navigation solutions. So they become our largest customer. While we have all that data going in, the OEM started asking, "Hey, listen, how do we transact on this? Right? We're showing them where it's at. How do we improve the experience for transacting for the drivers. So then we created our transaction side. Excuse me. So then we created the transaction side of our business, and that enabling users and drivers to be able to pay for those transactions directly in unit in the head unit, right? And from there, it kind of expanded out. Hey, you guys are the leaders in the parking side. What else can you do for us? This EV thing's coming along. Can you help us on the EV side? So then we expanded out to EV charging, fueling, and tolling. So those are our four pillars right now: parking, charging, fueling, and tolling.
So how does Parkopedia itself integrate with the growing electric market?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, the EV market is really kind of the Wild West right now, and it's really different between Europe and America, right? So Europe kind of pushed forward first. They made some mistakes along the way, which we've seen. One of those is, it's extremely volatile, and there's a ton of players in the market, right? I mean, there's thousands of CPOs/MSPs in Europe. So that market was really, really hard. There's lots of aggregators that came in, and Parkopedia came in and we have direct connections with a lot of the CPOs. We have connections with the aggregators, all that stuff, consolidating all that down to create the better experience. In the US side of the market, there's less. It's still expanding, right? When you looked at it, a year and a half ago, there was 30 to 35 CPOs. A year ago, there's 50. I heard someone the other day say there was 65 to 70 now. So the US is growing with the number of CPOs. And Parkopedia comes in and makes all those direct connections, and it really simplifies what that looks like, right? Lots of times I see, on LinkedIn and other stuff where they're talking about, oh, there's really only three CPOs that matter in America. Well, yeah, there's three big ones, right? There's Tesla, there's Electrify America, there's EVgo. But that's really just going to be on the DC fast charging side, and that's at
For
the macro.
now,
Yeah,
dot,
but
dot,
yeah,
dot, no.
exactly. But then when you look at the micro scale, you look at like Oklahoma, where Francis Energy has DC fast chargers every 50 miles, right? So like if you're a driver in Oklahoma, an EV driver in Oklahoma, and you don't have access to Francis Energy through your in-dash or whatever else, you're having a really bad charging experience. And the same
Yeah,
thing with Florida, with Florida Power and Light, and other areas. So like we look at a lot of things on the macro level, which we should, right? At the macro level, we're like, hey, we need more chargers, we need more chargers. But really, what impacts the drivers is at the micro level, right? Like, how do I find the chargers that are near me? It's great that there's a ton of Tesla chargers and Electrify America chargers across the US, but there might be other chargers that are closer to me. And how do we aggregate all that in that way where we're fixing the micro problem and the macro problem within the United States?
absolutely. Well, can you share any insights specifically into your partnerships that you have with car manufacturers and navigation systems to kind of integrate into your system?
Um, So specifics. So I can share some stuff on the parking side. A lot of the EV stuff is still in development and everything. On the parking side as a defined leader, first it came in and hey, let's get all the data in, let's get the clean data, let's be able to transact with it. And then it's, hey, how do we continue to improve and how do we continue to impact the driver experience, right? So you'll see with like integrations we have with, some players where we're doing new and interesting things like last mile. Like, so when you're doing your navigation from here to a city, right? So let's say you're driving into New York City, um, and we know that you're going to need to park, right? So parking is really difficult in New York City. So what we can do is we can change your last mile route to be able to drive past all the locations that are going to be most likely to have available on-street parking, and then end you at a parking garage that's really close to your location, right? So we can go through and help enhance those experiences for you.
Very cool.
Yeah. On the EV charging side, like what can that look like for stuff on the EV side? And these are all roadmap things that we're working through right now, but cleansing the static data is really important, right? Like making sure you have the right lat long, the right location, which by the way, the data we look at, more than 30% of it's wrong. Some areas and some CPOs is significantly higher than that. So cleansing all that static data is really important, but then we can get into cleansing the the dynamic data as well, right? So how many times have you pulled up to a charger that says it's working and it's not working, right? Going through and be able to do that, also being able to do forecasting. How many times have you pulled up to a charger and you thought there's going to be available chargers there, and then when you get there, it's all full and it's a wait list of 5 cars or whatever. So those are other areas that we're going to be able to enhance the discovery piece of the
You left
experience.
Yeah, we left East Tennessee and went to Atlanta. And I usually use PlugShare. I mean, that's just a very common app that's used, for charging station identification. And
Yep.
for some reason, I mean, I went to the app, found the charger that we were doing. I mean, the quickest route to Atlanta from us is more back road connections. And that's something that, like, there's one charger and that's the one that you're going to go to. And so I clicked the Apple Maps ID from the app, and was just happily trucking along. And we realized, like, 5 miles out, wait, it was in the two towns ago. And, like, the GPS was just taking us somewhere completely random based on what was punched in. So we missed the charger. Luckily, I had enough energy to get basically to Atlanta, to a charger out on the outskirts of Atlanta. But, should I not have, I would have had to turn around and go back 15 miles because the GPS data in that system was incorrect.
Yeah, I'm like, listen, we're really conditioned to using our cell phone first and going to our cell phone first for things. But should we? Like, is that what we should have to do as drivers, right? We have these new cars with these big, beautiful screens. Like, we should be using the in-dash to be able to do all that navigation because it's just going to be a better experience. And it's all in there for us, right? So, um,
I
part
think
of me is helping.
that's a big push right now too, isn't it? So that's when Ford, obviously we've talked about this before. Ford hired the one of the heads of Apple to oversee their integration of products. We constantly say, hey, what is Apple CarPlay or is Android CarPlay the best? But like to your point, now we have a large energy source that we can tap into. We have AI systems that now are lowering the amount of compute that's necessary to where you could have an AI system in your vehicle. I mean, Kit and Knight Rider, yeah, that's getting very close to having that ability. So when you're looking at your programs, since you are mostly a data company, are you considering, hey, if we work with OEMs and just supply the data, we could surpass, say, Apple Maps or Google in that aspect because our data is going to be more up to date because that's exactly what we're looking for. Oh, and by the way, we also have the cost of parking. We have the cost of the systems and everything probably much easier and better than what those programs are for these OEMs. Is that something, how does AI kind of come into what you're all doing in your expansion plans?
Yeah, absolutely. So, AI specifically is a big piece of what we do, AI and more specifically machine learning, for going through and helping with the algorithms to be able to go through and do the initial cleansing of all that data. But we have an army of people that also go through and look at every one of these POIs every year, right? When you're talking about millions of POIs, it takes a lot of people to look at every single one of them each year. And listen, Apple and Google are great. They're mega companies, but they have a lot of different things that they're doing really well, or they're doing well. To get into the micro level and to be able to source all the people and all the stuff that's needed to do what we do the way we do it, they're capable of doing it, but it's just not going to hit their radar, right? Like we have this niche. We are really good at the data cleansing and the data aggregation piece. And that's really where we shine, right? And putting it into those head units and making sure that users have that great experience is what's important. And I think that manufacturers are starting to see that, right? We come from the days of muscle cars when it's like, hey, how awesome can we make this engine? How awesome can we make this car? And it's all these physical things and 0 to 60s and all that. Well, with electric vehicles, 0 to 60 times are actually really easy to get, right? Like we've simplified a lot of that other stuff. And then it comes back around to how do we enhance the driver experience and improve the driver experience? And I look at a lot like, an Android versus an Apple. Personally, I'm an Apple user. I get that Android phones are better. They are, right? They have better hardware, they do more stuff. But I just want the simplified user experience. I want to get in my car. I want to tap into my navigation. I want it to be easy to use. And I want to know where I need to charge along the way. And I want my vehicle to just take care of all that for me. And our solutions are what help enhance that, right? On the other side of it, there's all these barriers to entry with an EV. In fact, what are some of the barriers to entry that you guys see with the EV, right? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing, I mean, the multiple things that we see the most, as far as, and we've discussed it several times, but I mean, the cost of an EV is something that has to come down. I mean, that's one that I think that is going to improve with economy of scale. Tesla started to get, lower in the cost space, but Chevy coming out with $100,000 truck EV doesn't do any good for the EV market. I mean, they'll sell their couple thousand of them, and that will be all. But that's not, that they're not going to sell 500,000 of those a year. The second thing is charging infrastructure, which is rapidly improving. We're seeing, like you said, the CPO game increase. The funding is, allocated to help, chicken or the egg, get the infrastructure out. But barrier to entry is the charging infrastructure confidence, the range of these vehicles improving to improve confidence as well. But then also, the cost, being something that's affordable for the average driver.
Yep. Yeah. And I would argue that enhanced discovery and transaction improves all those areas. It might not directly fix all of them, right? But enhanced discovery and transactions would improve all those different areas. So when we look at infrastructure, we need more infrastructure, right? When you look at California, we got wait lines at Electrify America and all these other things, right? But improved discovery can enhance that, right? If you have access to all the different chargers there, especially as we get into more like multifamily dwellings and less DC fast charge or less home charging availability, being able to know where you can charge and know what's available and not available is incredibly important. Electrify America is always packed because everyone can charge for free there, right? But you might have another station that's a mile down the road in California that said that you're not going to charge for free because it's not part of your thing, but you pull right up and charge right away, right? So the discovery enhances the infrastructure piece. We need more chargers. I'm never going to debate that. But we also need to enhance the discovery and make sure everybody has access and easy to find those chargers.
I think if we had a charging system that we knew had a certain level, the maximum amount of charge we can get at the lower price of the spectrum, not 70 or 80 cents per kilowatt. And it is something that once we know where it's at, then everybody's going to kind of go to that location. But, Josh and I had an experience this past week in Nashville. I think we spoke about this before to you. And we were out trying to find charging systems. The Electrify America was not on the map, and we had read on reports that it's been repaired or is in the process of being repaired. So that wasn't an option on the south part of town. So we thought, okay, we're going to be up here for a while. Let's go ahead and find a level 2, 19.2 kilowatt. And, this is where I look at what your app offers. And again, similar to PlugShare, but again, the data is the big key to it. We had a hard time trying to find everything. And then the question is it working? Is that somewhere where we can go? Do we want to leave our vehicle there? And, what is the parking fees? None of them showed parking fees, when we were looking at it. So I think that even though you're not a direct competitor to PlugShare, I could easily see you having that raw data that's going to be needed to develop it. And I think it would be difficult for PlugShare to get that raw data since they have not been in the parking space market for a long time to get that information. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And just to your point, we would love to have a app that told us exactly where we needed to go. That's the closest that was working and was the highest charge, but we just didn't have it.
Yeah. A app would be great, but then also just being able to rely on your vehicle is, incredibly important.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the beefs I have, and I mean, I don't know how to resolve this. I was telling this to Jesse on our trip is every time you punch in something into like Apple Maps or a routing system, they always overcharge you, not like financially, but they over stop you for charges. I know I can get home, but they want me to stop and charge. And if I pass that exit with a charger, the maps are going to try to turn me around to go back to that charge. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I know that I can get to where I'm trying to go. But for the average user, if I'm routing a trip, I think that they like the truck freaks out if I try to, like, even with Apple Maps, but even if you use the navigation, it's the same way that's built into the vehicle. they're going to want you to stop and charge way more frequently than you actually need to. And I think it's maybe the edge of the buffer. They want you to stay over 20%. I really don't know how the algorithm works, but we were traveling home and I was like, I know I can get to my house and I'll have 50 miles of range left. And I got home with 45 miles of range, but it really, really wanted me to stop
Yeah.
at a charging station. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I know what I'm doing and how I'm getting there. So part of the algorithm figuring out how to allow drivers to be more risky if they want to be more risky for the network.
Well, one thing too that I see here that we've not even discussed yet is the future applications. Obviously, at ACT, there were a lot of class 6, 7, and 8 vehicles that charge.
Mhm.
There were a lot of vehicles that have trailers. That's again, you identify the problem and you create a solution for our stations that we're building. All of them are going to be, except for maybe an exception here or there, are designed to be trailer drive through or pull through charging. So it's like a traditional fuel system. But, one thing I see on your site is you also say, hey, for height restriction, you got 32 feet, or you've got 8 feet, or you've got 6 feet. We've not had an issue where our F-150 Lightnings can't go into a building, but we have puckered very much so as we're going down through some of these because it looks like you're going to hit. Now that
Yeah.
you have that larger vehicle that's going to be on the market, and they're out there saying, okay, I need to charge. Where can I go? Not only are you going to have to find the correct charging system, you have to worry about if you can get into that or if there is a ADA compliant spot for it. And that's something that when I look at your sites, you take care of all of that for people.
Yeah, absolutely. The accessibility piece is really important, and being able to make sure that the drivers have all the information that they need, and the vehicle has all the information it needs to make decisions as well, right? One area this is important is like pull through spaces, right? As we start doing more towing and stuff, very few of the charging locations that exist today supports pull through or would support a trailer that's there, right? So being able to have all that information is incredibly important. It's like overhead lighting and all these other pieces, right? This is probably more 3 or 4 years ago, but there's times where you're driving down the road, you have to stop somewhere at night, and you're stopping at a charger that's behind a gas station with no lighting, surrounded by semi trucks. A lot of people are uncomfortable with that situation, right? Being able to know what you're pulling up to is incredibly important.
Yeah.
But circling back to before, where you talked about you're driving and it keeps wanting to make you stop whenever you're about to go below 20%. I see that again as like a big discovery failure, right? And the reason that they do that, in my opinion, is because they know the worst possible thing that can happen is that you run out of charge, right? The average consumer, the last thing they want to do is run out of charge, pulled over on the side of the road, calling for a tow truck, whatever else, right? And the infrastructure that was put in a while back, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was really the first wave of EV infrastructure coming out. It had a lot of issues, right? And we still, as a society, as an industry, don't trust our chargers that are out there. The ones that are coming today are significantly better than they were before. But we still just don't know, hey, where you have an old charger that, regularly has issues, where do you have a new charger that's always going to work, right? And that's all an aspect of discovery.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot more data learning to be done on, driver habits and, destinations, because the last thing a driver wants to do is to make unneeded stops for convenience. I mean, the one of the largest inconveniences to the EV experience is the charging station stop. If I'm talking to somebody that's not an EV driver and they're talking about their concerns with getting it, was I don't want to be stopped for an hour, and like, there's discovery to be learned, and like, hey, like, it's not an hour, you can do it in 20, 30 minutes. And but also, I'm driving to Nashville, we stop for 15 minutes, you stretch our legs at the Bucky's, and by that time you're plenty enough to get there. But it, overcoming some of those things, but also not creating unnecessary stops when not needed, because you go to a different charger, it's a different charging session, you have to do the plug connection, you have to get the app pulled up. I mean, it's all a process where limiting, because part of it's charge curve. a lot of times they're going to want you to charge, like if you route a long distance trip, they're like, well, charge up to 65% and then go to the next charger and then charge back to, I'd rather just stay at one charger for longer, get to 80% and then get to the charger beyond that. That way I don't have to stop 5 times, but charge curve, you're going to get better charge speeds up to, 60% in an F-150 Lightning. But just like learning what the driver's habits are better and being able to adapt the routes to meet that. Because I knew even on a worst case scenario, the worst I've ever gotten efficiency wise on the interstate is 1.9 miles per kilowatt. We're getting technical now. But even if I took that math and applied it to how much battery I had left, I had more than enough to get to where I wanted to get to. So unless I put a trailer on the back of myself, I'd be more than fine to get to my destination.
Man, how great is life going to be in 10 years when there's a Bucky's every 3 to 4 hours that you can just stop at and charge and then move on with your day?
I think we'll still be them. Again, it all comes down to what you're looking for. And we've even been discussing, on the Buckies, you're out still pretty good distance away. You don't have covers. You know, once you take a whole bunch of people inside, they're all going to want, $150 worth of stuff that you really don't need, but yet you're going to do that. So, what we're looking at is also how can we make our sites more attractive in those same markets? Because we will have a charging system in the market where we feel like would be in a Bucky's area. But that is probably what people are going to look at. Okay, I can make that one stop here and go, but that doesn't mean that a truck can. We know tractor trailers can. We know that a municipal building that won't go necessarily down that area may need to stop and charge. Or if you're a Uber or Lyft driver in an EV Bolt or whatever, you might want to charge somewhere that has 8 or 10 cents less per kilowatt because hey, it's going to be the same every time. I don't have to have a membership and I'm in this for the money, and it's going to be a higher charge than it would be other places. So I think like everything, in 15 years, you're going to have those main hubs of where people are charging. But I think the more important part is the rural districts that could support the industry, which is kind of where we're looking at. And obviously, when we get into level twos, what's that going to do to change the landscape of where people can charge on a daily basis prior to even getting out into the market?
Yeah, absolutely. You look at like especially in Europe and places in Canada as well, they're a lot more focused on the level two side. And it creates a much better charging experience holistically, and really supports a lot of the people like the multifamily dwellings and stuff, the people that don't have access to a garage with a charger. Really opens up their ability to be able to go out and buy these EVs and be part of the evolution, right?
There needs to
Yeah.
be better data integration. I mean, I think we're starting to see it. Like you can filter an Airbnb by what has an EV charger, and like Expedia and some of those platforms are starting to get to that point. But if you just cold turkey going and booking most of these sites, as an EV driver, I'm going to a business trip for the night, let's say in Nashville. I show up to the hotel, it doesn't have a level two charger. Well, that means I have to stop the next day somewhere where I could have showed up empty and had the next day been able to leave on a full tank, if you will.
Yeah.
So I mean, for instance, the place that we stayed at when we went last week didn't have a charger. And so in that regard, we had to go out of our way, find the whole issue that we had with charging in Nashville to find a charger to charge up before we headed back from our business trip. And so that's where having the data integrations of like, hey, like this is where to stay, where to park, where to charge, all of those things, which it seems like you guys are already consolidating most of that in, but mixing hotel stays, mixing proximity to chargers and the availability for parking, all those things, I think is a key piece to, like you said, encourage adoption. Multifamily, if you're buying somewhere, where do you find somewhere that has a charger to promote that? Because I think the rounds of funding that are coming out are going to help really strongly promote those things, but the data points to really get people connected with those chargers is going to be hugely important.
Well, and location too. And I think you're building that background, where I come from a data analytics, background with data centers and hyperscale systems that I help build. When I look at the friends that's in that industry, one thing always comes up that data can tell you anything if you ask it the right way. So in this case here, we have a lot of chargers, for example, coming into different parts of the states. Where are they going to have the biggest impact to help, low and middle income families? Where are they going to have the biggest impact for travel, but still be out of the way enough to where it doesn't seem as if you're shoving a bunch of infrastructure on top of things that don't make sense. And I think, again, that's an area where your data could be part of the study that says, hey, here's what we have for public systems. Here's where people normally use, and then you can use that aggregation with, use case from the different companies that represent and say, hey, right here's the 15 areas that we need to have the biggest concentration at that's going to help the most people. And then we can filter out from there. But I don't think we're going to have that, unfortunately. I think it's going to be a drop of the hat, say go. We don't know yet. Nobody really knows what that part of the incentives are going to be like. They may or may not include those. We feel like they will, so we're preparing. But it's also good to know that companies like yours are sitting there saying, hey, as soon as you get that charger online, call us, let us know. Is there a way that we can integrate our data into yours to where you know when somebody's using it and it shows? Because again, I don't want any money for that, but if it helps you get people on your site to try to find those locations, then it helps not only us and it helps you as well. And it makes the data more accurate. And that is the key point, is good information. And if you have good information in, then you're going to have good information out. And I think that's where, looking at your site, I see a lot better designed for having that good information.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, let's not forget the goal here. The goal here is to drive adoption, right? If we drive adoption, everybody wins. And that's really what we're focused on here at Parkopedia, is using that high quality data to be able to enhance the EV agenda, and get more people driving more EVs, and that helps everybody.
So let's pivot, I guess, to kind of bring it all to a head. Where do you see 5 years from now Parkopedia being in a position as far as your guys' company and the promotion of EV adoption, and where your systems are going to land in the space at that point in time?
Yeah. So at Parkopedia, we're really more of a white label company. We're an enabler of the OEMs. Like we have our website, right? And we get, 5 million plus monthly active users on it. But really our main focus is with the EVs, or with the OEMs, the vehicles themselves, and supporting those. And what I see 5 years from now is, instead of you going to PlugShare on your app or another app to be able to find charging and pay for charging, it all needs to be in dash within the vehicle. And I see Parkopedia supporting and driving all that. And that's combining the EV charging with the parking, fueling for ICE vehicles, tolling. I see all that just being simplified and put into preference-based decisions for you, and your vehicle supporting everything that you do, right? So, like what you're talking before, Jesse, I want to be able to stop at these specific places. I want to be able to do these specific things. Like, all that should be part of preference-based decisions. Hey, I always want to pay through this one specific channel, right? I like to use Amex because they're not actually doing it. But hey, I always want to use Amex as my EMSP. And I see Parkopedia being able to enable that for the entire market, through plug and charge, remote start, and through the discovery pieces.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes tremendous sense. I mean, the more power we can give to the driver, the better. And that's not something that's currently done in the market. Is really, if you're routing a decision, figuring out, even with, like you said, an ICE vehicle, how do you provide the convenience of what that driver wants to see out of their experience? And so which gas station do you promote as far as, getting them to stop? Which one has the amenities that they might be looking for in the surrounding vicinity? And especially with charging, since there's lengthier stops involved, I would love to be able to punch in like, no, I don't want to stop at, a chaos filled Bucky's. I'd rather stop at something that's more family friendly, or I'd rather stop at something that's, has XYZ markers, faster charging, and let the driver, basically hone in on their selections, and then the routes and things are adjusted accordingly. And it's not just, pre filtered out to overcharge, but, take me to too many charging stations, and to be non-customizable as far as where I stop and how I stop. And as charging station, adoption and infrastructure developments grow, there'll be a lot more choices to make. Right now, if it's the chargers are every 150 miles apart, you don't really have much of a choice. But once they get to every 50 miles, there's, between here and the next charging stop, there's five available choices for most vehicles. And so, which one do you want based on your preferences?
Yeah, and it all just has to be intuitive, right? Like, You guys are into the industry and experts, and think about how much time we spend like having to go through and check the different apps and do all these different things, and how well we have to know our driving in our vehicles to be able to really do a road trip the way we want to. And should the average consumer have to do all that, or will they do all that? Uh,
One of the biggest grievances I have is all of the different, CPOs. Everybody has an app, everybody has a subscription, and everybody has, like you have to use their app to pay, and it makes adoption funky because then you have to pay $12 a month to get good prices at Electrify America, but then you have to pay $12 a month to use the Tesla network, and then you have to pay $8 a month to use the EVgo network, and then it's a lot of headache for a driver where it should be one. We should have it simplified to where there's one spot, no subscriptions, and you're not getting overbilled for power because you're not on a subscription service.
yeah.
Because networks across the board, I mean, between here and Nashville I could pick four different charging station providers, and we use three of those pretty regularly on our trips there and back, and all three of them have subscription based services. And so do you want to overpay for power and not have all those subscriptions, or do you want to subscribe when you're using the network, unsubscribe when you're not? It needs to be simplified and make it to where a driver can go to one platform that is, hey, here is all of the operators under one umbrella, and here, just punch your one card input, you can charge at the whole network across the nation now. And Ford and some of the OEMs are starting to get the plug and play, where a lot of the operators will just, you can plug your vehicle in and it'll communicate, and which is a great system. I think that's where it should be, but that you don't get discounts on power if you have those connections. And so at Electrify America, I'm getting triple billed because I didn't use the app to get 30 cents off a kilowatt or whatever it is. So there needs to be a consideration for that somehow, and figure out how to get everybody under one umbrella and happier. But
Yeah,
I think
that's
that goes back to your part about using the OEM screen and using that system. That is one system in my truck. I've got a double the iPad size that I should have. I can use it for anything. You're in a truck that eventually will become a technological base for compute. And if we're adding in your information from the back end, again, that data is what the screen will be creating. And then it's up to the OEMs to decipher what your information is and use it the way they want to use it. But I think that's basically just integration of technology, and you are one of the players in that field. Do you have because we talked about the commercial space, I want to kind of real quick go back on that. Do you see the potential to have, here is your system to aggregate for people parking, but eventually say, okay, we know that the commercial space, we got people making deliveries now, we've got people needing to charge that side. Do you foresee having a commercial side to where, because obviously there's completely different search engines, there's completely different requirements, but do you see that as something that you're going to build along with what you have? Because you have the base. It's just, if I'm in a truck that has a trailer with it, or if I'm in a box van, the box van's going to need to charge in a completely different way if I'm going across country.
Yeah, so we're here to support the market and whatever they need. Typically, we're very driver user focused, right? Your daily driver focus. However, we do have applications. We do work in the fleet space, and all that's going to be coming down the pipeline as well. I think what's going to be really interesting. So I didn't talk about it much before, but we did have an announcement recently with Iridetto that we're creating a multi-contract plug-and charge solution. And that will have significant impacts on the fleet world, and giving them the ability. So like you said before, like, yeah, plug and charge is great because it makes the user experience simpler. The problem is you then lose all your choice, right? It's a very linear thing. So whatever the direct path is between the OEM and the CPO, which is never a direct path, it's always a very indirect path, is where you're paying, right? And there's going to be inflated as you go through there. The multi-contract solution that we're creating gets rid of that linear path and allows you to still have the choice within it. And then we'll bring in some of the preference-based decision making that's done before, and it supports all that. I say all that to get back to your fleet case, right? So if you're going through and you are your commercial case, most all commercial vehicles are running off of some sort of fleet management system. Having that fleet management system operate as the EMSP, so the payment provider within there, allows us to go through and direct them to the right chargers for the right vehicles, right? So ones that they can pay through their fleet management system, still using plug and charge, and will support the vehicle that they're driving. Because not all fleets are big trucks, right?
Gotcha.
Well, there you go. I think that's great information. I mean, there's a lot of data and technicals that we could talk to, but for the general salvation of our audience, we're not going to dive into over technicals there. But do
Yeah.
appreciate the insight. I mean, I think it's a very unique insight to kind of the back end of what the future of the back end might look like for these vehicles. And hopefully the driver never really experiences anything other than just a seamless integration of technology. But these technologies hopefully can be incorporated to help promote adoption and help promote, convenience. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's really promoting convenience, because at the end of the day, like you said, it's for ICE vehicles, for EVs, figuring out where to go, how to park, all of these choices that can be made, whether that's for the EV driver, the ICE vehicle, or whoever, that all of that makes the driver's experience more seamless. And so definitely admire Parkopedia for all that you guys are doing in the space, and kind of how that integrates into the future of technology with these companies. So
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely appreciate all the work you guys are doing on the infrastructure side. We need more chargers for sure.
absolutely agree. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate the insight. Tune in next week for more EV news and updates.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to Turn Down for What. Tune in next week for more EV news and updates. Make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on to be notified when we post more episodes like this one. See you then.